I see some people have already joined, Serine.
Yes. Good morning, Ala. Good morning, Joy. Ala is from CBK, our client in Kuwait, Commercial Bank. And we have Joy from Boyker in Lebanon.
Very good.
Yeah. Hi, Nandita.
Hello, Serine. How are you?
Good. And yourself?
I'm good, thank you. How are you doing?
Good, good.
Good. Hi, Anya.
Good morning.
From DP World in Dubai, based in Dubai.
Yep.
Oh, great. So it's really diversely located, a little bit from everywhere. Oh, it's great. I'm really looking forward. We still have 5 minutes to go, so hopefully some more people will join in as well. We're a bit early still. Now it's going quick, I think. People will start rolling in more and more. So welcome. Good morning.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning, Ala.
Hello.
Morning.
Hello.
How are you?
Good. And you?
Alhamdulillah, Alhamdulillah. All is well. Hello.
Morning.
Good morning.
Very good morning, ladies.
Yeah, you're surrounded by ladies.
Yeah, I'm the our team will be joining shortly.
Oh, nice.
Okay. Great.
Yeah. I think Regina is joining now.
Great.
And Maria will be. So, how is everyone?
Great.
Very good.
Looking forward to have this webinar.
Yeah, Serena, we enjoyed it already, like the preparation phase a lot. So it bounces off very well with each other. So we're looking forward to doing the webinar together as well. Good morning.
Hello. Good morning.
Hello.
So if it's okay, I'm gonna start sharing my screen so everything is ready, and then we can start at the hour. So
Yes, please go ahead.
It works. So normally everybody is seeing my screen now.
Yes, we can.
Perfect.
And of course, we have started the recording so that everybody is able to check it out later on. And for those who will not be able to join or like not join at least the full hour.
That's great. So Serena, I'm counting on you to start off because I'm not seeing the hour anymore.
We still have 2 minutes. And
oh, great. So maybe we can ask a first question before we kick off. Is everybody already aware of high impact learning that lasts, or is this really the first time that you're hearing about it?
For me, no, I've heard about it before, but I'm looking forward to get more details and more info.
Very good to hear. Thank you.
Yeah. So,
a little
1
bit of
minute.
So others are also commenting first time. So that's really exciting. So I'm gonna look forward to explaining the model a little bit, and yeah, it will be super fun to hear also how it has been applied already. So.
Right. So, I think we can start, Anya. It's
Right.
11 sharp.
Go ahead.
And actually, people are joining, or maybe give it a second. Hi, Ahmed.
Morning. Hi.
Good morning.
Morning.
Great. So let's start, Anya.
Yes, let's kick off.
Great. So good morning, everyone, and welcome to this webinar on the HEL model. Basically, this webinar is the first of a series of webinars that we will be organizing jointly by IQuad and CrossKnowledge, discussing the HEL model approach and how it can be applied in your learning process. HEL is not a training program. It is neither a teaching method. It's actually a good framework to analyze your way of working currently, and it will help you rethink your learning trajectory to increase your impact. I am happy to be presenting today with someone whom I call an expert on the HEL model, Anya. So I will start actually by introducing ourselves. So my name is Serene Katura, and I'm the Operations Director at IQuad Learning Solutions. My experience in the digital learning goes back to 2010, and I have been working closely with different organizations in the Middle East region to actually design and implement their digital learning initiative, while making sure we are achieving the objectives and reaching a high return on investment, and of course, making an impact. Anya?
Yes, my name is Anya Emons. Thank you, Celine. And well, I'm actually working for CrossKnowledge as an academy research manager. So I handle all the research that is going on the platform of CrossKnowledge and how to optimize it. And next to that, I'm also doing a PhD where I'm focusing on learning climate and online learning behavior. So how does that influence? How can we create a good learning climate, and how can we support it in big organizations? And that, of course, is very closely tied with how we are delivering training. So it also explains why I'm so interested in high impact learning that lasts. And also it helps, of course, that two of my promoters for my PhD are also the creators of the high impact learning that lasts model. So yes, thank you, Serene.
So basically our agenda for today's webinar, as it's going to be the first, as we said, in a series of webinars. So this one will be focused on the introductory part and why do we need to do this change. So we're going to spend the first 10 minutes discussing the dynamics in our environment, what we have been noticing lately in the industry, and why there has been a need for change. Then, of course, we'll move into the core of our webinar. What is the HEL model? How it can be applied, while sharing actually real examples from actual implementations with our clients. So practical takeaways for you actually to have. And we'll end it up with having at least 10 minutes for the questions and answers. Of course, you're invited to actually post your answer, to type them in the chat box, so that by the end, once we reach to the Q&A, we'll be able to make sure to answer them accordingly.
Basically, your CVs of a manager, SM and AG. Yes.
Mute your mic. Okay. Before we kick off the agenda, let us start by introducing our organizations. So iQuad Learning Solution is a digital learning solution provider. We've been founded in 2010, headquartered in Lebanon, with direct operations and offices both in Lebanon and in Dubai, the UAE. So, and we operate indirectly in the rest of the Middle East region. Our mission is to help organizations implement innovative, intelligent, inexpensive learning integrations. And we have been partnered with CrossKnowledge, a leading in digital learning solutions since 2011. We are their strategic alliance partner in the Middle East region.
And we are CrossKnowledge, and we are super happy, of course, to be a partner with iQuad. And we as CrossKnowledge allow you to address the what to learn with a full solution that delivers relevant learning. And we really believe that learning will be relevant when it responds to the learning needs that are being influenced by the market, when it allows you to effectively address your specific business needs, and of course, if learning is satisfying the needs of your individual employees. So we also are a Wiley brand, which means that CrossKnowledge is one of the Wiley brands worldwide. And Wiley actually is family owned and founded in 1807. So we go a long way back, and we actually really believe in research and education. And this is also why we love partnering up for webinars like this, to really deliver that extra education to our clients and to others out there, to really deliver the newest insights in what's out there.
And here's actually a partial list of our clients, the leading organizations that we partner with. And as you can see, we have different organizations available regionally and globally.
And then we're, of course, kicking off with our webinars. So we're going to start off with having a look at what's going on in our daily environment. And there we can really see that there's two big influences happening. And we really feel here as well in these dynamics the influence of the pandemic that we have just witnessed. On one hand, we really see that there's a lot going on when it comes to labor relationships. There have never been more different generations at the work floor than during these times. So that also has an impact on how ready our employees are. It really creates a demographic shift. We have so many different people that need to be taught how to use different technologies, and some people are much quicker with this than others. But it also influences how we engage the workforce. Different generations ask for different engagement levels and maybe different ways to get them engaged. And of course, it influences the employee value proposition as well. On the other hand, and this is something that we felt really strongly, is that there's been a huge shift in technology and digitalization. We actually see that these past 2 years, there has been a huge digitalization wave coming over us. The digitalization shift has been quite quick, and if I can say it, even a little bit dirty. Not all of the things that have been put together have been well thought through. When the pandemic hit us, a lot of people thought that it would be a good idea to go towards online learning. And this shift has happened rather rapidly, but it was not well thought through. So it means that there are ways to optimize the learning. Luckily for us, iQuad has some very nice examples on how to do this. We also see that with the technology and digitalization shift, new business models have sprung up. For instance, restaurants, they suddenly had to go towards getting people to dine out towards delivering at home. We see a lot of new jobs and skills popping up. We see, for instance, influencers. It's a job that didn't exist a few years ago, but now with going more digital, it's becoming a very important job. It's becoming something that influences other people. We also see a lot of economic turbulence. It's a very different things that are happening there. We see, for instance, the rise of cryptocurrency, stuff like that happening as well. Plus, we have never been more global. It's so easy to connect with each other through the internet that a lot of opportunities have risen there as well. So when we look at those two big influencers, we actually see that there's a huge impact on employability. And why is that so important? Well, because employability, it's being driven by learning and by skills. And we actually see that for the future, those skills, that's really something that CEOs, 8 out of 10 CEOs are actually being worried about. They really worry that the lack of key skills is a serious threat to their company's growth. And what kind of skills are we then talking about? Well, the skill to innovate effectively. We see that costs are rising more than expected. The quality or customer experience is impacted because the skills are not present to really help these things. So it's very interesting to see the importance of skills for our future. But then there's an important question that's popping up then. What are the skills that we do need for the future? So we actually found that these are the top 10 skills that we need for 22, for next year. And it's really interesting to see that, yes, skills are still very connected to learning. We actually even see that the top 3 are learning skills. We see that the number 2 is active learning, and I put this one in red because it really is an important one. We need to get people active when they're learning, because then learning becomes much more impactful. They need to apply learning on the work floor. They need to get busy while learning. And why is active learning so important? Because actually number 1 and number 3 are very connected to that. If we get people active, trying out things at the new work floor, well, it also has an influence on their innovation. It also has an influence on their creativity. So when we give people room to experiment, innovation can happen. And of course, when we make it okay to experiment and when we make it okay to learn, creativity can happen. So hence, that's why that number 2 is so important for our future. Active learning, really something to focus on. But then how do people like to learn? Well, if they like to learn actively, there's an important way of looking how corporate learners want to learn. We actually see that indeed that active part is super important. People like to learn at their own job. They like to learn at their own pace, but they also want to decide this is the moment I want to learn. They want to have an influence in their learning. So giving access to 24/7 learning opportunities is more important than ever. Making sure they have the option to learn continuously and just enough, it also is very high on their list of things that they want. And of course, letting them be connected with other learners. We will see in the Hill model that all of these things are incorporated. So Hill high impact learning that lasts is not just supporting how people want to learn, but it also is making sure that there's an impact towards your learning. So why then invest in Hill? Well, we actually see that there's a lot of money being thrown towards learning, but are these investments actually paying off? When we look at the research, we actually see that 80% of employees currently don't have the skills that they need for their current and future jobs. That really means that there's a problem with how we are delivering training, because the trainings that we are delivering apparently are not building the skills that we need to build. So there is something to improve on there. We need to start boosting learner engagement. We need to make sure that what we are delivering is applicable in the workplace and that we can create impact for the learner and the organization. Well, that of course explains why you and we should be investing in high impact learning experiences. But a little bit of more why we should be investing here. We actually see that there's a huge effectiveness of Hill present as well. And Deslauriers did a very nice research on this. We actually had two groups. One group where we had a very traditional trainer who was very into face-to-face teaching, but he had a lot of experience in how to do that. And we compared that with a different group with a very young, inexperienced teacher, but that was highly trained in delivering trainings due to the Hill method. What we actually saw after 3 weeks of training is that the results of those two groups differed a lot. There was actually 33% more impact when we measured the training methods of the second group. So people retained more knowledge, they were able to reproduce more knowledge, and they were able to apply that knowledge better in the second group, which was working due to the Hill method. So, of course, this brings us to the question, if this Hill method is so effective, what are those 7 building blocks then comprised of? Maybe it's also very interesting to know a little bit more about Hill itself. The Hill model, which you can see here, was actually developed by Professor Dr. Mien Segers and Professor Dr. Philippe Dauchy. And they summarized about 25 years of pedagogical research on what really works to create these 7 building blocks. It is actually a model that was created for young potentials, professionals learning at the work floor, and experts learning at the work floor. So it really is something that resonates very closely with our target audience. And third, and maybe most important to know, there's no hierarchy between these blocks. There's not one block that's more important than others. All blocks are equal. However, the more building blocks you apply during your training, the more effective your training will be, and the more people will retain knowledge from your training. So let's then kick off with those 7 building blocks. Let's have a look at each of those building blocks. Oh, okay. Sorry, I thought there was a question popping up. So let's kick off with urgency. And urgency for me, it really is the first building block that we need to handle. It's one of the building blocks that you need to handle in the beginning of your training as well. It's making sure that you're seducing learners to start learning. And creating that urgency really is an ideal starting point for the learning process. And we really see that with urgency, every situation, it should clearly start with a problem, an experience challenge, or even an item that creates that sense of urgency. And we really see that you can do that by, for instance, fueling curiosity and energy, or using authentic problems as a trigger, and maybe even letting people set some goals or facilitating that. And the idea behind urgency is that we really make sure that people see the relevance of investing in learning, and that we make it very explicit why we are going to invest in that learning. So we need to pull them into the learning and make sure that they're ready to invest their energy and their effort and their time into learning. And I'm pretty sure that EQuAD has some very lovely examples of how to do this.
Yes, Anya, of course. And we're starting with an example from DP World in their online terminal operations structured program, where they created this sense of urgency by starting the program by a welcoming message, introducing and highlighting the importance of joining this program. Then they followed it with a timeline describing the different steps and the objectives to attain at the end of each step, and finally involve the learner in actually planning and setting their own objectives, why they need to complete and to actually go through this program, and how this will help them in real life.
So here we already see 2 very nice examples of how you can create urgency during your own training programs. So the first one, which is beautifully applied, is of course having someone very high up in the chain explaining why it's okay to invest time and why the learning is important. Really connecting that towards the learners and making sure that they have the feeling it's okay to invest in this learning. And the second one is, of course, setting your own goals. So asking the learner, what are your goals here? Creating those goals jointly, it really hits upon that creating urgency as well. So thank you very, very much for these beautiful examples.
Our second example is from Warba Bank, whereby here they were simulating a real life situation, basically through their onboarding program. And again, we have a message, a welcoming message for all the new joiners from the CEO himself, introducing the importance of getting onboarded and how going through this journey would actually help them build on their career and actually become a full-time employee at the bank.
And again, beautiful example. Oh, sorry, you wanted to add something, Cyril?
No, go ahead then.
Thank you. Again, a beautiful example. And here we really see the power of actually personalizing this message as well, making sure that it's available in multiple languages so it really connects to the learner and that urgency can be created even stronger by that personalization. So it's a really lovely example here as well. So then we are moving on towards our second building block, which is putting action and sharing plans into practice. And this really is about making sure that people get active. We know that when people are active, learning is happening. We really should be giving them information and then making sure that they're applying the things they've learned, that they're thinking about things, discussing things, because at that moment when they're being active with the knowledge that was given to them, that's the moment that people are learning. And of course, we also see here a little bit that social part of learning, sharing things. People love to build upon each other when we're learning. It's a really great way to actually gather information from other people, but also gather viewing points. So we actually see that active learning and knowledge sharing, those two should go hand in hand. Learning really should become a repeated process of linking practice, so doing things, to concepts or knowledge and further deepening that through discussions or collaboration. And that's really a difficult way of saying we all should make a habit out of talking out loud about what we have just been doing with the theory. So really making sure that people talk things through and really discuss what they're doing with what they've learned. And ideally, these talks should happen, of course, at the work floor as well, when we're working together with each other. We actually see that there's a lot of different ways on how you can apply action and sharing. For instance, you can have peer discussions. There are a lot of interaction within teams. You can have follow-up conversations. Or for instance, you can use snack learning and then make sure that there's a platform that supports that action and sharing. So make sure that there's a platform where people can actually exchange information and experiences. And be very aware that this platform can be online or face-to-face. So let's have a look at how Equad is doing this.
And here again, continuing with the terminal operations program, we see how DP World actually implemented the action and the sharing activities within the program itself by introducing different social activities. Like in one example, we have an open question whereby inviting employees to share their feedback, to discuss and to learn from each other. And the other one is the poll activity, also helping in setting the frame for the program and in initiating this sharing among all the attendees of the program.
Yes, you're really getting people active by asking open questions. It's a very strong way on getting people to communicate. And of course, the platform also allows to build upon each other. And then, of course, those poll questions are very interesting to get people active, especially in the beginning of courses when people are still a bit hesitant and resistant because they don't know each other well. So these are two great ways on how to get people active and build further upon the shared knowledge out there.
Our next example is from Burgan Bank. where actually action and sharing activities are key in many of their programs and initiatives. And here we have selected two of them. The first is about the effective mentoring program that they have launched for the leaders at the bank, training them or coaching them on how to become a great mentor. And we see in the first slide screen how they are introducing the sharing part, whereby these leaders would have to participate to give their feedback and to actually comment on how this program will help them become a great mentor. The other example is from their well-being initiative. One of the sessions on here, for example, the yoga and meditation, whereby they started with an open question to get into the action of employees to get involved, and then scheduled a virtual, or actually this was a face-to-face session in order to highlight this collaboration and actually meet it face-to-face.
Again, these are really great open questions that really get people active, and it kind of pulls people out of their comfort zone, because they need to type in a reply, and then of course people can build upon each other. So it's great that it's not a yes or no question. It really is something people need to think about, reflect on, and then answer. And of course, that last one, I really love this idea of the well-being yoga and meditation, especially because there's a live office session. I think that's really great, because we're just combining that online part with offline part, and we're really getting people to take action. So we're really getting people together and getting them active as well in their learning. So let's move on to the next building block. Thank you. And that is actually hybrid learning. And I've just touched upon it a little bit already, because we just saw a really nice example of how to go from online towards offline. But here we're really talking about hybrid learning. And it's important to also discuss here a little bit what we call blended learning, because we all know what blended learning is. However, there has been a little shift from blended learning towards hybrid learning. And that really is coming from the idea that when we're talking about blended learning, a lot of people are talking about something differently. So we actually have so many forms of blended learning that it's becoming a problem during a conversation to know what the other person is meaning with the term blended learning. We actually saw that there's been a great research summary from Graham Allen and Orr, and they're saying that there's 3 different forms of blended. The first one is what we call the soft blend, where we're blending pedagogical ways of delivery. So you can have a round table, you can have a group meeting, you can have an individual part during your training. So those are all different ways of blending pedagogically. On the other hand, there is also a hard blend, where we're blending delivery media. So we're really blending using an iPhone, maybe using a cell phone, using a laptop, using a tablet. We're really blending the things that you can take within your hands. So technology. And then, of course, there's that third blend, where we're talking about a mix of the pedagogical and the technology. So we're really talking about blending hard and soft blends. So that's the third one. You can imagine, if we're talking about blended learning, this really creates a lot of confusion. So what happens recently in research, we actually see that people are starting to use the term hybrid learning. And hybrid learning really means a well thought out mix between online and offline. So it's a little bit of a different definition there. We especially focus on the well thought out, because that really means thinking very carefully about which moment in time we're going offline and we're going online. So it really is about thinking at which moment in time during the training online has the most impact or offline has the most impact. And there are some very important things to keep in mind there. So when you're having a hybrid learning journey, starting off with a group meeting is always very, very important. We actually know from research that online teams which have met once, even if it's virtually, they're much more impactful than teams who've never met in real life or have never met virtually. So it's very important to create that bonding time and to have that experience from, oh, I'm not alone during this training and I know who I'm working with. So keep that in mind when you're designing hybrid learning as well. So let's have a few looks, because we know that, for instance, online and offline is important, but how do we then mix that in a very well thought out way? I know that eQuad has a few very lovely examples. And before we go to those examples, I also have a little screenshot from what we call a wow room at the bottom right. And that really is a way on how to bring people together and letting them see each other, creating those first connections before you move forward with the learning. So let's go over to the examples of eQuad.
Yes, Anya. And here, moving on with the online terminal operations program, where we see how this mix has been implemented or applied actually. So we have discussion forums that have been introduced within the program, in addition to scheduled workshop within the whole program at different intervals in the different steps, whereby people would join virtually in order to have this mix between the online part, the formal, the informal, the social aspect, and also the virtual or physical aspect.
And this is really a great way to do this. And the most lovely thing about this is that recently we have been seeing an influence of the pandemic on how people are experiencing these virtual meetings. So people are actually saying that because everything has been going digital recently, that these kind of meetings where you see each other face to face and you can see and hear each other face to face, they're being more and more inclined to discuss, to actually say that these kind of meetings are actually face-to-face meetings. So this really means that, for instance, trainings like these, they are important for people, and we actually see the influence of that pandemic on these kind of workshops, because people are saying that they're much more motivated to actually finish the training after having a face-to-face workshop during a training like this. So we actually see the influence of the pandemic here, and that's really funny to see that even we are seeing some kind of meetings that used to be categorized as online now as offline. So it's funny to see that that switch has been happening due to the pandemic, but it really is a great way to do this. And Serene, thank you for this lovely example. Here I also have added an example, and this is a really nice example of how you can create a 6-month learning journey. So here we really see that there's 3-day programs where people actually come together, they actually talk things through, they meet, you can create connections with each other, and long term, people already have these connections to fall back on when the training goes back online. And here we really see that there's a lot of different elements during this 6-month journey. We have live virtual classrooms, there's digital courses and assessments that people can do at their own pace. There's this immersive classroom that I've just mentioned, but there's also a lot of social learning going on, so people don't feel alone. There's a good connection to on-the-job assignments. And on top of that, there's a lot of coaching going on and the personal project. So a lot of different things that really pack together towards a very nicely well thought out mix between online and offline learning. And then we're moving on towards our next building block, which is learner agency. And here we really are talking about giving people the choice within their learning. So the more choices that we offer people, the more motivated they will be to actually finish their learning. Because it seems that the more choices we offer people, the more they feel entitled towards their own learning, the more they feel they have a say in their own learning. And that, of course, increases motivation highly. We see that, of course, this is something very interesting and how to do this. For instance, we can do this by offering self-reflection activities or letting people add their own agenda to learning courses. It's not always easy to provide learner agency, but if you get creative, it becomes something that is possible. Of course, feedback also has a lot of influence, so make sure that you give a lot of feedback towards the choices that people have made. There is, however, with learning agencies, something very important to keep in mind. There is a kind of balance that we need to keep in mind. And that really is, if we offer people and learners too much choice, they will feel like they're drowning within their learning. However, if we offer them just the right amount of choice, that motivation goes up. And what happens here is that in the beginning, we need to be very careful with offering choices. So we offer little choices. Towards the end, the choices can go up and we can offer more bigger choices. So in the beginning, this really means during a learning or during a training trajectory, you can start with, oh, do you want to invest in this learning object or in this learning object? What strikes you as most important today? But towards the end of the learning trajectory, it can even be as big as, what is your own personal development plan for the future? So gradually build up those choices to create learner agency. And let's have a look at some very nice examples.
And here, Anya, we're representing this block as learner agency through DP World, how actually they offered, like you were saying, a more focused option in terms of the learning through offering a learning channel whereby learners have the choice actually to go and decide on the talents they would need to improve on the content they would need. However, also while highlighting the content available or the resources that they need to choose from.
And this is a really nice example because it really shows us it's simple. People have a direct overview. They don't need to scroll too much. Please be aware of that, especially when you're delivering online choices. That's less scrolling. The less scrolling, the better. So they really have this overview immediately, and it really is clear for them where they can go and how they can choose what they want to learn. So it really is a lovely example here.
The second example is from BankMed, whereby they have decided to offer their employees with different tracks to choose from. And the initiative was called GROW, as you can see in the screenshots. And they have the Grow Yourself track, the Grow Your Teams, and Grow Your Business. And under each track, they had different content and courses to actually select from and improve their skills on.
And this again is a very lovely example because there's choices being offered, but it's not too much. So people have an immediate overview, they can choose and they can move forward. And what is even nicer is that afterwards the choices are being so nicely represented by images, which is always something that draws the eye. And it really is a good representation of learner marketing as well. How can you seduce people to click on something? It's very nicely done. So thank you very much for this one.
A third example here about learner agency is from Bank BMO, Saudi Faransi, BBSF, where actually they represented this learner agency in their values initiative, where they actually asked or invited the learners to provide their feedback into how this value is implemented in their daily job. And then in sharing real case at work and providing their own feedback of how this will be tailored toward improving their own learning.
And this is, again, such a good example of how we can make sure that this is happening. So there's a lot of choices being offered. What are you sharing? And we're really doing something afterwards with what's being shared. And that's really important as well. So it's a lovely example here too. And then we're moving on towards our next building block, collaboration and coaching. And this really is the social part of learning at its best. Here we're really focusing on how can we learn from each other and how can we learn from facilitators or coaches. So we really see that variation is, of course, crucial in learning. And even collaborative learning should be as varied as possible. So really think about how you're offering that collaboration as well. It's of course very interesting that we also see that there's a limit to what people are expecting of collaboration. There's actually a very good rule that you can use when you're creating a training program, and it's very easy to apply. If you're creating a training program about your collaboration should be between 1/3 of the program and 2/3 of the program. Well, why is that? Well, because when we offer less than 1/3 of collaboration during our training program, people are actually stating that they're feeling alone. They're feeling closed off. They're feeling not motivated to continue because everything is on their own. So they're falling back on their own motivation solely to really finish the training. If you give them more than 2/3 of collaboration, then they say that everything is together. They don't have time to really reflect by themselves. There's no time to calm down and to really think about things by themselves. So there really is this sweet spot that you need to hit upon with collaboration, and that is between 1/3 and 2/3 of collaboration during your training program. So really think very carefully about how you're doing that collaboration. And of course, coaching is hugely important as well. Whenever learners are feeling less motivated, a coach can really make that difference by just asking, hey, what's going on here? And of course, that coach is super important to facilitate the learning process as well. So here you can see some examples of how to do this. For instance, line managers can be coaches. We can use high and realistic expectations. We really need to make sure that there's enough variation in social learning methods to use. And of course, we're going to have a look at how ICORD is doing this as well.
Yes, Anya, and our first example is from Rida Chemicals, whereby they started by introducing their facilitators and coaches in the program. The program is about perceived value selling. It's a custom program that they have developed internally. So as we can see, they have introduced the coaches in order to promote this collaboration from the beginning and breaking the ice. So the second screenshot is about an exercise to break the ice by having candidates or the attendees join in by introducing themselves and getting to know the coaches or the facilitators so that the program would actually give impact.
And again, these are two examples of the two parts of collaboration and coaching. So we really see a very nice example of coaching where we actually meet the facilitators in the beginning of the course. So people are much more inclined to ask their questions towards those facilitators. They feel much more at ease because they've been introduced. And of course, there's this exercise to break the ice, which really facilitates collaboration later on, because people have already formed some connections, that network has already started being built, and that means that afterwards people can fall back on that network whenever there's problems or troubles arise during the learning.
Our next example is from Boyker, where they make sure actually to promote collaboration and coaching in the different programs they're running. So here we have an example of a customer service course that has been run, and here it's offering them with different sessions, actually virtual sessions, in order to collaborate and to share virtually or face-to-face, depending on the context, what they have learned from the structured program or from the online part that they have been enrolled in. Another example of such activities is in their Knowledge Forum initiative. They called it Illuminate Your Mind, where they discuss different organizational skills, and in each step or each of the skill, they ask the learner to share their ideas and to see how these would be actually implemented in the workplace.
And these are very creative ways, of course, to support collaboration. So we really see the different ways of doing collaboration online, offline, and also very smart use of what we call, of course, a forum, of making sure that there's open questions and people can build upon each other. So very nice examples.
A third example, going back to DP World in the terminal operations program, whereby they have involved, of course, facilitator all through the program. And this facilitator has been actually answering the questions or answering inquiries from the learners in the program. And here we can see how they are communicating through the assignments in that regard.
And this is a lovely example of collaboration again, because this collaboration, it doesn't always need to happen between, of course, the people following a course. It can also happen between a coach or facilitator and the people following the course. So there's different ways to really make sure that that coaching is happening. And it's a lovely example where we can see people building up on each other and making sure that the learning is at the spotlight of the learner. And then we're moving forward towards the building block flexibility. Yes, learning happens anyway, anytime. So it's very important to keep in mind that our learners, they might have different questions than we were being targeting during the course when we were designing it. So we know that, of course, we as designers, when we are delivering our training and when we are creating the training that we want to deliver, it's very easy to get stuck on what we have created. So flexibility really is about making sure that your learners can add to the course as well, and that you're able to deviate from the course that you have created whenever the opportunity is there to, so it really is about supporting that informal learning as well. And we all know that informal learning is something that is best stimulated and not regulated. So it is really difficult to plan for it. However, there are some workarounds that you can use to make sure that you're hitting that informal part as well, or at least making sure that you're facilitating it. So what are we then talking about when we're talking about informal learning? Well, we're really talking about making sure that during the training, you're anticipating on the moment itself. What is happening at that moment? Of course, it really means that we're supporting some kind of behaviors, and we're really supporting that information seeking. So people who want to get more knowledge, we're really supporting that help seeking, people that get stuck and they are asking help from coaches, from others, and of course, people that are asking for feedback. So it's really important to reflect on things that people have been doing and to see where we can add upon that. So we're going to see some very lovely examples from EQuad here as well, where they have added flexibility towards their training and left some room for people to add what they are expecting.
Yes, Anya, and the first example is from Middle East Airlines, where actually they offered their learner the choices into actually choosing from different learning channels, targeting either behavioral skills, skill path, or even office and desktop productivity, as we see over here, whereby they were gathering the feedback of the learners, getting what gaps they had, and then offering them with the choices of these channels to have the flexibility in enrolling in them.
It's so nice to see this as well, because it really means that people, whenever they hit upon a certain question or a certain problem, they immediately can, it can immediately be added towards the learning trajectory. So that's really lovely to see.
Our second example is from Burgan Bank, whereby in one of their initiatives, as you can see in the first screenshot, they offered learners with different choices. So they have a learning library whereby they go and improve their skills there. They have an assessment center. They have discussion space available whereby they would be able to collaborate and share among each other and with facilitators. And there's the additional resources section whereby they would go and select at their own choice from the different resources available in the different formats.
And we really see two very strong supports here. So that discussion space is super important for creating that informal learning discussion. So whenever people hit upon questions that they might need their network to answer, that discussion-based space can really answer that. And then, of course, we see those additional resources where whenever people feel, oh, I still have this question, but it's not being answered, the trainer, coach, or company can add to those additional resources so extra questions can be answered as well. Lovely example too.
The other example is from Reda Chemicals, where actually also they offered an informal channel for their learner. However, it was a themed channel. So here it's focusing on the communication, but employees would go and just select the resources or the content relevant to their interest. And we see in the second example, the use of the affinity widget that we call, which will suggest resources or courses based on the activity of the people. So here, helping them out also in recommending what other resources they can check.
Yes, and this is so cool because it really connects to what people are already looking for. So in case their question was not answered fully, there's of course some really good related resources that might still answer that question. So I think you're hitting upon a very important point here as well. So thank you so much for this lovely example. And then we're moving onward towards our last building block, which is also my favorite, which is assessment as learning. And here we really see that assessment should not take place only at the end of a learning course. So get creative and add more assessments in different spots. And make sure that when you're adding assessment, that every time the learner gets some feedback on what was assessed. We actually see that when we have assessments at the beginning and during the course, people are feeling very highly motivated. They're saying that it's something that they love to get feedback on. They love to see their beginning situation. They love to see what they've learned and what they still need to work on. So it really is exciting for them and it gets their motivation up. What we also see when you use assessment at the end of a learning course, at that moment, people are saying, okay, it's still interesting, but you need to be a bit more careful with it because a lot of the people are also saying that it's just for the company, that assessment at the end, and it's just for giving a grade towards what they've been doing. So you can circumvent those kind of reactions by making sure that there's a discussion or a talk after that end assessment, where people can actually again look forward. How have you scored on this end assessment, and what are you going to do with it for the future? So making sure that you create that feed forward feedback loop, where you really feed everything that you've learned from assessment back towards the learners so they can drive their learning in the path that they want to go. So there's a lot of ways to use assessment. You can use self, peer, co-assessment. You can even use 360-degree feedback assessments. However, we're going to have a look at how we've been doing this in practice.
Yes, Anya, and here actually before discussing the examples, I can say that assessment as learning is being used by all our clients and all our solutions. So they make sure they utilize the assessment in different contexts. And here the example of DP World, which comes also from the same program, whereby it is used to test their understanding. So to build on the knowledge that they have gained in order to move forward or to actually measure the impact that they have achieved. The second example is from BMO Bank, whereby they utilize the assessment. Anya, can you move to the next slide? Yes, here BMO Bank utilized the assessment actually at the beginning as a pre-assessment, and then at the end as a post-assessment in a way to measure the knowledge gain. So here the learner would actually see the gain in terms of the knowledge, at the same time the manager and the L&D, which will allow them to define if the objectives were met of the program. So in the first example, it was in a custom program designed internally, and the second one is based on behavioral resources according. So assessment is being used at the beginning within the programs or at the end, be it in the form of feedback survey, of manager assessment, or evaluation assessment for the learner himself or herself.
Such great ways on how to use assessment. And I think that also brings us towards our summary of the Hill model. So feel free to take a screenshot here, because this is Hill in a very few sentences kind of summarized all of those 7 building blocks. And then I'm going to give over the word towards Serine, because she is going to explain the takeaways.
Yes, thank you, Anya. Before mentioning actually the takeaways, I just would like to highlight that through our practical examples, we try to show you different ways, different activities that you can be implementing or applying in your programs. And one example is through our client DP World, where they were able to use the different blocks, the 7 different blocks in one program in order to increase the impact of that learning. So I hope this will help you in designing your programs to help people learn effectively in a constantly changing world. For the takeaways, of course, after this webinar, we're gonna share with you a couple of questions survey, whereby we would be looking forward for your feedback that would help us in actually planning the next webinars that will be focused further on the different building blocks. We're going to share with you the recording of this webinar, and we're going to share with you the infographic of the Hill model, whereby it's the summary of the 7 building blocks and the description of each. And we'll be looking forward to have you in the future webinar that will be planned accordingly. I think now we have time for the questions.
I'm good. Stop sharing my screen if that's fine. Always fun to see people.
Okay, so good. Thank you, Anya and Serine, for this presentation. We have some questions that I will start with. The first one is, what is adult learning? What is adult learning? The first question.
Anya, do you want to answer
I was
this?
wondering if you were going all right. So the Hill model really was developed for what we call adult learners. If I need to specify, it was really developed for learners that are working at the workplace, experts learning at the workplace, and of course, young professionals. So these 3 categories can be are being targeted with the Hill model. So I think that really explains how adults are being seen by the Hill model. I hope that that helps.
Great. So we have also another question. How do you break ice in COVID-19 era?
So I think Serine has already given a very nice example on how to do this. Maybe you want to rephrase that a bit as well, Serine?
Yes, exactly. So as we could see in the different examples, there are different ways to actually do so online through different activities, be it by introducing a certain question at the beginning or inviting the participants or the candidate to actually set their own objective to introduce themselves. So this would break the ice at the beginning, introducing the facilitators and the coaches, if any, in the program. So all this would help actually break the ice and have the program start accordingly.
And we actually have seen very different ways of doing this as well during the past with several clients. We once had an icebreaker challenge where people were actually nominated to give like a little brief presentation of themselves in a very creative way in a video. And then when they uploaded that video, they could nominate the next person. So you can have kind of a challenge that keeps rolling like this, and at the end, everybody has been introduced. But of course, there's also other ways on how to do this. So I know Serine has a lot of ways, and she has just explained a few. So.
I can see we have a new question.
Yes, we have a new question. How did you measure the impact of the Hill model applied with your existing clients?
Yeah. Well, at this moment, we are using the questionnaire. So there is a Hill questionnaire that is available and that lets you measure the impact of your training. Of course, next to that, when we look at the research of Deslauriers and all of the research that was done in the past, a lot of that research has been built upon what we call empiric literature. So it really is literature that is showing the effectiveness of learning. And then, of course, there's a big difference when we really start measuring effectiveness. Most often we're focusing on language skills or on mathematics because these are very easy things to measure. However, when we look at how we are measuring effectiveness based on Hill, we're really measuring how many building blocks are present. Sorry.
Sorry,
good morning. Can you please mute your mic?
Sorry.
Yes.
So on one hand, there is a difference between Hill and where it was based on, and of course, how we are measuring Hill. So we are using the questionnaire that we developed, and it really helps you measure how many building blocks are.
Anya, I think you're muted.
Anya, your mic is muted.
Oh, sorry. Did you hear my answer just now, or?
We missed the end of it.
Okay, so I wanted to say, so we are, of course, measuring the impact of Hill with this questionnaire, where we can first measure how present the building blocks are during your training. And then of course, impact of your training is being measured by how many people are still retaining that knowledge after a while. So I hope that explains.
Yes, and I would add that by using the different activities that we have, if we're using our solutions, so this would actually help in measuring to a certain extent, depending on the learning process that is being implemented. So I think this brings us to the end of our webinar today. As mentioned earlier, we're going to share the recording of this session for whoever joined lately or could not go through all the webinar. And hoping you enjoyed it and actually taking away some practical examples and ideas to how to improve the learning within your learning process. Thank you, Anya.
Thank you, Serine, and thank you all for attending. I really enjoyed explaining the Hill model, and I hope that it was useful for all of you. So thank you so much.
Thank you all for joining. Have a nice day.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.